Hold up, we're gonna stop right there. I assure you that the title and thumbnail is not a lie. This is probably one of, if not the most broken deck I could have possibly come up with for this illegal deck format that I've decided to just scheme up. And it's even more scary considering the fact that this is a Bakugan that came out in year 1 of the reboot. Alright, if you cannot tell from the thumbnail, the Bakugan we're going to focus this deck around is Darkus Nihilus Ultra from Battle Planet specifically. Now yes, this Bakugan has a measly, pathetic 200B on an orange shield plus 406 damage, but I think I can make this work. You see, Battle Planet Nihilus Ultra is notoriously good at getting double cores. Excuse my English, breaking apart there by the seams. So in theory, this thing could already get 200 plus the 400, 600, plus the additional 400 there, 1000 already on its own. That's with one core. It picks up another one, it's going to be at 1400 base on roll 1. That's just with a double core shenanigans. But I'm going to explain why I have other cores here from my skiers in a moment. All you need to know is, bring some 400 boosting cores for Darkus over here. I personally like to mix it up, so I've got one for Darkus Ventus, Pyrus Darkus, Aquas Darkus to mess up my opponent. If they're running other factions, well then they're not going to get the buffs. Or if they're running full Ventus or full Pyrus, whatever, then they're not going to get the buffs on the other ones. But these here are mainly just for me, for what's in this deck. So what's in this deck, you may ask? Well, because of course we got Nihilus, we need to have his Evo. So I got 3 copies of Hyper Nihilus Ultra, because already we can get high numbers with this card as it is. But if we run a Hyper Nihilus Ultra, we'll start at 500, get 800 instead, so at 1300, plus the extra 2 orange shields, so another 800 on top of that, 6, so it's we're at, 800, plus 800, 1600, plus the additional 500, we're at 2100 already just with this. Now, in theory, if you can somehow manage to get Maximus Nihilus Ultra out, you will be in for a very lovely surprise, because you're going to get up to 2,800 base alone, if you can get this card out. It's very expensive, but you know what? We don't care. If this is just for fun, and I have another card you could use to swap this out with later, but we're going to get that when we get to that. Dark Fortune, we're going to have 3 copies of this. This is specifically so we can try and get these Evos in our hand as soon as possible. So we got 3 copies of that. We're going to have Dark Spark. This is just a quick 2 energy cost card for additional 500B. We're going to have 3 copies of him. We're going to have 3 copies of Umbro Slash. It costs 2 to use. Plus 100B for each flip card in my discard pile. These cards will have a specific use shortly. Now this is the reason this deck is so broken. I had to just basically Photoshop to make these brighter, because you could not read these on the first ones I printed. Like, you cannot read that says Darkus Shadow. Anyway, Darkus Shadow. In the format that I thought of for the illegal decks, your opponent will run a mono attribute deck, and so will you. So Darkus Shadow, 4 NG, choose one. Any one of these factions, except for Aurelus or fused ones, the opponent reveals their hand and discards all the cards of the chosen faction. So basically, your opponent throws out their entire hand for 4 costs. I put 3 copies of that. Next, we got some buffs. In case we can't get the Evos out, we got some backups. Scorching Swords, we got 2 copies of that. 2 energy, Shadow Strike, plus 100B, plus 1 damage, nothing crazy, just there, it's mainly to give us Shadow Strike. Next, we're going to have 3 copies of Brutal Barrage. This is another one that's very hard to read, but I promise you it says Brutal Barrage. I'll put a higher quality photo up on screen. It's 3 cost, gives us an extra 200B, plus 2 damage. When you play this, if a player has no cards in hand, plus 500B, plus 5. So again, this plays back into Darkus Shadow. If you play Darkus Shadow and you play this for free, because remember, we have a bunch of Baku Gear Reduction cores. So we can get this off for free at the same turn we are playing Darkus Shadow. increasing our B, and destroying the opponent's hand and getting a gear card on for free. This is also applicable to Scorching Swords with the gear reduction cores. But yeah, we got 3 copies of Darker Shadow. Now, you're gonna hate me for this, because I've got 3 copies of a card that's very hard to get a hold of, Magnus the Power Hungry, Baku Hero. If your Bakugan have 100 B for every 1 punchy they have. Insta Brawl for 4 energy, put this hero into play at the end of the turn, it is destroyed. So in theory, if you don't even evolve this Nilius, it will just get an extra 600 B to its base stats the whole time. So it's going to be at 800 base plus 400. It's basically evolved already with a little bit of a debuff with this in play. But you can stack this. And if not stack it, well, at the very least you got backups. But I know people are going to hate me that this is here, because it's a very expensive card to get a hold of. Oh, sorry, by the way, I don't think I mentioned this at the start. These are all printed proxies. So if you don't have this, or you don't want to use this, or you think it's illegal, you can just swap it out for Magnus instead. When you play this, so Bakugan gets 500 B. Victor, you may discard a card to give the Bakugan punchy equal to the discarded card of the energy's cost. This will actually work with the other Nilius Evo card from earlier. If you control Magnus, get an extra 20 punchy. But if you have both Magnus in play, in theory, you could get insane numbers. But yeah, let's just move on, please. Next, we got 3 copies of Block and Bite. The next flip card you play this turn is for free. This is going to explain us in a moment here. We also got 2 copies of Weapons of Darkus, Stop a Darkus or a Fusion. We got Cease Outsiders, 2 copies of that. So if you, on turn 1, manage to land on a Block and Bite, the next one you play is for free, you get to do one of the Cease Outsiders. Or you could do Black Hole. We have 2 copies of Black Hole. You could also get that off for free. And then we've got 3 copies of Pact of Darkus. Again, it's basically Cease of Darkness, except you could play this for free if you sacrifice a card. And then we also got 2 copies of Creeping Darkus, Stop a Non-Fusion Bakugan, and if you do, a player discards a card. Well, choose a player to discard a card. Now, the deck is not perfect, and I feel it's very broken. You can, like I said, swap out some of these cards for things like Magnus, and it could still work. You can also include Geogon. If you notice, I didn't use Geogon in this deck because I'm confident with my rolling ability with this Nilius. But you could use these 2. These are the 2 I recommend because they're cheap, they're quick to get out, they have decent B power on par with what this Nilius can get if you somehow miss. Yeah. So, what do you think of that? See, I made this deck specifically to prove a point that in this illegal deck format that I've developed, where it's just the same Bakugan, all 3 Bakugan, in the same faction deck, I can make a broken deck. I made it to prove a point. I feel like my point has been proven. Excuse me, I'm so excited to use this that I'm stuttering over my own words. Especially because after recording that, I decided to just double check my facts, and yes, Magnus the Power Hungry does stack. That is terrifying. If I have to face against that, that is pants-fillingly scary. I'm so scared I'm stuttering. That, and it's like 1 in the morning for me. So if you don't mind me, I'm going to just leave you be. But first, I'm also going to announce that there's going to be a how-to video soon coming up on how you can make your own illegal deck, the specific rules and regulations on how it can work, and a possible tournament coming up involving that as well. So, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.